Extraordinary Life Stories is proudly sponsored by the Jorja Emerson Centre.
My name is John Reynolds. On this episode of Extraordinary Life Stories, I'm talking with Robin Emerson. Robin was told to take his daughter Jorja home and that there was nothing more that doctors could do for her. She was going to die. As a father myself, I can honestly say those words turned my stomach. The fact that Jorja is alive and well today is down to Robin's sheer determination and unlimited love to find a solution to save his daughter's life. I want to know about this incredible journey that includes lobbying government, pioneering new medical research and the opening of the Jorja Emerson Centre with big plans ahead. I'm really looking forward to speaking with Robin. Welcome. Tell me, who is Robin Emerson?
I've got known in the public eye through my daughter Jorja. Jorja became the first child in the United Kingdom to be prescribed medical cannabis once we changed the law in 2018. And now I've moved into the medical field and we talk quite publicly about Jorja's story and around mental health.
Yeah. So tell me, before Jorja, what were you doing?
Before Jorja, I was always in business. I used to be actually doing construction. Very hectic then, but again, very much based around construction, business and making money. What was around.
Ah, cool. And then take me to the journey that brings you up to Jorja. So what age was she when you knew that something wasn't right?
So Jorja was born in 2016 and it took 10 months before we realised that there was actually anything wrong with Jorja. So before that we just thought Jorja was a typical baby. And then we realised when she got to 10 months that she wasn't quite meeting her milestones. So she wasn't able to roll over, she wasn't able to sit up by herself, and then we noticed things like her head was smaller than what it should have been, and then she only had a single crease in the palm of her hand. So she had this moment that transpired later on that it was actually Jorja's first seizure, just after 10 months old. So that from then life changed quite rapidly till seizures seemed to progress very, very quickly, and she was constantly every week A&E. It was just 999 calls. Seemed to be in a constant position for a long time, and without really any answers from the medical establishment of what was wrong with Jorja and what was the issue. So we were very lost in understanding of how progressive Jorja's issue was, and then we got her diagnosis that she had this rare chromosome deletion, which is called a 1q43q44 deletion. So it's extremely rare, and Jorja is one of only 2 children in the UK with that specific chromosome deletion, with most of the children based in America and Australia. And that's where we discovered that Jorja had this really rare condition, that epilepsy was going to be a big part of that rare chromosome deletion.
Right.
And then that coincided, they were having the seizure. So it was all at once that we were discovering all the issues that was happening with Jorja. And then 2017, in summer 2017, Jorja ended up in intensive care on 2 separate occasions. With the second occasion, they told us that there was nothing more they could do for Jorja and to take her home to die.
It's something that no parent can ever imagine being told. And you know, we're going to talk about Jorja clearly, but at that moment, just talk to me about yourself and of course, you know, your wife. Where did your head go? How did you process this?
Yeah, it was a very, very difficult time, of course, and I think it was so many emotions all at once.
Sure.
You know, I remember them to come into the foot of Jorja's bed, the consultant, and you know, Jorja was on life support and she had all the various different cables and wires attached to her, and he came and he says, look, there's, you know, Jorja's brain's decaying, it's going backwards, the white matter's disappearing on her brain. I was asking how was this. He was telling me it was a chromosome deletion, to which I hadn't never seen it linked to that before. And then he says, "Look, there's nothing more we can do for Jorja. She's going to die from this." And at that moment, it was just horrendous. And I actually had to leave at that moment to go downstairs, out the front door of the hospital. And I remember stepping outside the front doors of the hospital, and there was a car coming up, and just through my head was just, "End it now, Robin. What's the point in continuing?" And yeah, it was horrendous, and I've never felt like that before in my life until that moment. And something held me back, and I'm not a religious person, but there was definitely something that held me back. And I went into the hospital, I got my phone out, and we were members of a private support group for Jorja on Facebook, a private group for her chromosome deletion, well, people around the world. And I remember putting the message in, and I just said, "Please help me. Somebody help me. I'm being told my daughter's going to die." And within about 30 minutes, I had over 80 replies of people in various countries around the world, "Never been told that, stay strong, go and ask more questions." And then at that moment, that was from being so emotional till angry, Robin, of wanting to fight, wanting to understand what am I being told. And it was that side of me then took over of no, I'm going back upstairs here and we're going to understand what's happening. And that evening, and I went back and I just started to do all the research I could on Jorja's chromosome deletion, no links till children dying from brain decay. And then I just started to talk to other doctors to understand how do I go about engaging with Jorja's medical team professionally and properly, and to understand what was wrong with Jorja. So I'd requested a meeting with the doctor the following morning, and with his team, and that's what we did. Then we went in to have a meeting.
And you've got time pressure. I mean, you're clearly woke yourself up and just like, I'm determined to sort this. But you've got a ticking, clock here with Jorja needing to be ultimately saved. Did that put a certain amount of pressure on you, as well as actually trying to find out the right way of actually finding a cure?
It did. It was the first lot of pressure was obviously understanding was Jorja's brain decaying. So that was the first issue we had. Was, is Jorja going to die? So that was question number one, and I needed that answered. And whenever we had that other meeting, it went horrendously. I asked for a second opinion within the NHS system, to which I was denied it.
No way.
So I decided at that point that I was going public with Jorja's case. So we contacted UTV News, the regional for Northern Ireland, and ended up the main news of Northern Ireland that evening. Me and Carly, my ex-wife, were interviewed, and we went through and just specifically asking people, I need help. Please give us a second opinion. Why are you denying us a second opinion within the system? The response we had from the public was fantastic. Unfortunately, the response we had from the NHS was extremely poor.
So they stayed silent.
They stayed silent.
So they've told you to take your daughter home to die, and there's nothing more they can do for you.
Yeah.
So you're left on your own devices now to try and save your daughter's life.
Left totally alone, and the fact that I couldn't understand, why are you not allowing me to get a second opinion? Why are you denying this second opinion? And there was just so many red flags were coming up at that stage of something was wrong. So I decided we needed to find, as I said, a second opinion on is Jorja dying, to which we came across Boston Children's Hospital in America, and they were running this second opinion program. And then we came up against our next hurdle, and that was simply to get Jorja's medical records in order to send them to America, as I was now at this stage being denied access to Jorja's medical records.
Right.
So that was our next battle in trying to do that.
Under what reason? Why would you not be allowed to access your own daughter's medical records?
Well, that was the problem, John. They wouldn't even give me a reason to why they wouldn't give me access to it. Told me it was coming, and it wasn't coming. So I ended up, I hired a legal firm back home, a human rights lawyers who were well known in Northern Ireland for big cases. they took this on, and we ended up front page of the Daily Mirror at that time to say family of sick child suing hospital for the notes, because they wouldn't give us the notes. So we were actually heading to court when eventually my barrister got the phone call that they were willing to release the medical notes. And we got all the medical notes, through the medical notes, ready to go to the Boston Children's, and the neurology notes, which was our main issue.
Right.
And so George had files and files of notes, and then you had neurology as our main issue with one sheet of paper in our notes. So we'd fought for these notes that didn't contain anything really. And then at that same time, we used the solicitors to fight for another MRI scan, to which eventually we got that other MRI scan. We got it together with all the notes and sent that off to Boston Children's Hospital to do the second review program, which was a very slick process, actually very professional, very good. They came back to us and they said, it took about 2 months, and they come back and they said, George is not dying, George's brain is not decaying, you need to get her epilepsy under control. And they went forward actually to discuss drugs that she had been prescribed in Belfast, and said actually them drugs, if you continue to give her them medication, that will kill Georgia.
Oh my goodness.
So
So you've gone from the emotions of probably ecstatic that you now know that your daughter is not dying,
Yeah.
having been told she is, to then realising that she's on drugs they've prescribed, the same people,
yeah.
that could actually be killing her.
I actually remember I was sitting in the car outside Sainsbury's back home when I got the call from Boston Children's to go through, and I remember just sitting in tears in the car of total relief, being told that that I knew inside me she wasn't dying. I always knew she wasn't dying. You have that feeling as a parent to a child, as you know, you just have that link, and I knew in my heart. And I always knew that if she was, I always knew, well, at least I knew I was doing everything I possibly do to double check them answers. And it come back that she wasn't. But yes, the biggest surprise then was seeing these medications. And then that was when I started to dive into medications in the UK and understand between licensed medications and unlicensed medications, and understanding that this drug that Georgia was being prescribed had never went through any clinical trial anywhere in the world for the treatment of epilepsy. And actually our own NICE guidelines that oversee medications in the UK said that no child should get it for longer than a 2-week period. Georgia had been on it well over a year at this point.
Wow. This is pretty shocking.
So it was horrendous. If you as you say, shocking now to you, shocking to me, sitting there as a parent.
Far more emotional to you at that point.
And seeing my own child being told them things about Georgia.
Extraordinary Life Stories is proudly sponsored by the Jorja Emerson Centre. Introducing the Jorja Emerson Centre, where innovation meets health. If you are tired of waiting for a diagnosis or believe there should be other ways to treat your condition, the Jorja Emerson Centre could help you. We take a patient-first approach and offer the latest medications and technological advancements in private healthcare across a number of key areas, including but not limited to headaches, migraines and chronic pain, mental health conditions, addiction and ADHD diagnosis and treatment. We have an on-site lab for diagnostics to enable you to receive health assessments on your terms and in your timelines. From our state-of-the-art clinic in central London, our consultants want to help you improve your quality of life and access to affordable healthcare services. Take back control of your health at the Jorja Emerson Centre. Extraordinary Life Stories is proudly sponsored by the Jorja Emerson Centre.
So take me now, you've realised she's on the wrong medication, you've got to find something that's going to work. Take me through that journey.
So I started the research treatments for epilepsy online, to which I ended up coming across medical cannabis, and I could see it being used successfully, and a lot of anecdotal evidence. There's a lot of families talking about their cases being used. And I particularly, then there was a child in Australia called Emmy, who had the exact same chromosome deletion as Georgia, and I could see this beautiful child who was thriving. And I was going, how is she doing so well? Why is Georgia struggling? And at this stage, Georgia couldn't lift her head off a pillow. She was so heavily sedated, just lying where, couldn't move, saliva out of the corner of her mouth, no quality of life. And contacted Emmy's parents, and they were like, medical cannabis changed everything. And they just come through and explained it was like a light bulb being switched on, and suddenly Emmy's development was moving forwards as well as controlling the seizures and all these other positives from it as well. And just started to then contact more and more people, started to contact various doctors in Canada.
How receptive were they, in terms of, because you're obviously pioneering this, particularly bringing it to the UK?
Well, back home they weren't receptive at all, as you can imagine.
I thought you'd say that.
And I think the NHS thought I'd lost my mind. I think the hospital at home thought, I was very much painted as a father who couldn't accept his child was dying. And that's what I was basically, I could hear doctors telling nurses that this father can't accept his child's going to die.
What father can?
Exactly. And then we look at medical cannabis treatments across in Canada that was being used, and I asked Boston Children's about what their thoughts around it was, and they says, look, it's very early days, we've only started using it at the hospital, but we're getting very positive results on it. So it just spurred me on more and more to realise this is what it was. And then I joined up with some parents who locally here in the UK to start campaigning, because at that time it was illegal in the UK to get a prescription for medical cannabis. And then I made the decision, John, that was it. Jorja was coming out of the NHS and I was putting her in the private healthcare.
You had no choice.
I had no choice, and the thing about it was I didn't even know how I was going to fund it all. I didn't know what I was doing.
No.
Because at that time I had at some restaurants that had opened back home, and I actually only one open 8 weeks, had to shut it because of what was happening in my life. I had no funds. I'd moved back in with my mum and dad. So life was extremely difficult on that side as well.
Yeah. That must have been, going back to you again, this must have been incredibly stressful on your relationship with your wife, with your own mental health. I mean, you're achieving the fact that your daughter Jorja now is not dying, but just the amount coming at you, sleepless nights, and your mental health must have taken a tonking.
It was horrendous. We went through it was a real circle at that time, because whenever Jorja was first born and we didn't know anything was wrong with Jorja, Carly was very good. Carly was very ill at that time, and she was had a bit of postnatal depression and finding it hard to deal with Jorja and when she was first born. So I did a lot of the early stuff. Then we fast forward to was finding out Jorja was ill at 10 months old, and I couldn't cope. And I took it very bad at that time that Jorja was ill. I had all these dreams and aspirations for your child, and all these visions of what you're going to do with your child. And you're going to, go to school and the first school plays and the various different things, and walking your daughter down the aisle, and realizing that wasn't going to be my reality, and I was going to have a very different life. So my mental health at that time was extremely poor, and I couldn't be open and honest about how bad my mental health was at that time. Looking back now, and my life's totally different. I realise that how bad we are as men to talk about our mental health and the situations that we're dealt. And I was ill and needed help, and I wasn't getting any from anywhere.
No, thank you for being so open. So you're at that point now where you're lobbying the government. Talk me through how that journey was. I imagine that was a combination of frustrating and then ultimately successful when you managed it.
It was. I've always realised that I was always good at public speaking. I was always being able to right from school. I enjoyed that, so it was something I enjoyed, and I knew it was a skill set that I had. So whenever we joined together with the other parents and different people that were coming in to advise us and help us at that time of our lobbying of what we were doing, very much then started putting me in front of the camera a lot. Meeting with MPs was a lot of what I was doing. Yep. Realising how the machine works that is the UK government, and understanding all the mechanisms to it. Very different in business. So I'm used to business, used to driving stuff forwards, making things happen, and realizing politics works at slow and stop, and it's very frustrating. And I'm just going, why can you not just change the law and just allow this to happen? Oh, and I couldn't get that in my head about, and have positive meetings going, yes, this should happen, and all these MPs going, yes, it should. Cross-party support, probably one of the only subjects that has cross-party support. I was laughing Northern Ireland that brought together both sides of the community, and both saying, yes, this should happen. And yet everything was extremely slow at that time for it to eventually happen. But November 2018, with, I'd say, combined effort of people over years who were advocating for the use of medical cannabis, and then just the stories like Jorja that was getting into the media at that time, then just propelled it, that it was something that the government had to take seriously. And there was a couple of children who were starting to get access via a licence scheme behind the scenes, where the Home Office were granting licences to allow product to come in. And yeah, then it just started, the pressure was too much on the government, and they sanctioned Dame Sally Davis, it was at the time, to go out and find out was there medical value in cannabis. And she came back and says overwhelmingly there's more research needs done, but you can see that there's that the government needed to reschedule it. And that's what happened. So we thought, fantastic. November 2018, laws changed. I thought Georgia's going to get, this is going to happen. Georgia's going to get access. And at this stage, Jorja was very ill. She she got out of hospital again, but they knew it was a race against time because her seizures were just increasing again. And Jorja was having upwards of 30 seizures at a time in a day. With any one of them seizures could kill her.
Wow.
So and then her quality of life, because even the point, as I said before, it's the medication that she was being given. She was being given this medication that simply just sedated her. So she wasn't having the quality of life that she deserved. So yeah, it was, but getting the law changed was one element. Getting access to the medication was another.
So where are we in that journey? From 2018 right through now to 2023?
Yeah.
Talk me through that.
So that December, as I say, we'd taken Jorja out of the NHS, and we were talking to various doctors within the NHS who were all, we're not touching cannabis, this is madness. I think they thought I wanted to give Jorja some sort of a joint and
so the stigma of cannabis, I can relate to that from growing up and friends smoking cigarettes and then gravitating to that and so on, and the fact that it's wrong and associated with that. But surely within the medical profession they would be looking at it as, does it have benefits for people, and if that's in any way true, embrace it. Well, research it.
You would think so, but it's unfortunately the UK's innovation around medical treatments full stop. And we know, obviously now, knowing in the medical field what I do, I can see firsthand how poor we are.
Right.
And we're not even in the top 10 of innovation from the country that used to lead the way. We're nowhere near that anymore. We're risk averse is what we are, and we're ending up that's what happens across many, not just medical cannabis, but many treatments out there that people aren't getting access for. And we're continuously seeing media stories of children and adults trying to get access to various medications that simply the UK is not giving people access to.
So your campaigning undoubtedly sped up that process that from November 2018. Clearly there's a journey still to go through, and you're massively pushing that. That brings us on to the Jorja Emerson Centre, and the fact that you didn't just keep Jorja alive, and she's alive and well now, but actually you're very much trying to make sure that no one goes through this journey again. Clearly there were people before you that were told to take their children home to die, and it's tragic to think what's happened there, but you're very much looking forward now, pioneering, pushing to make sure that there's a centre for people to be able to come and have treatments and not go through what you and importantly Jorja have been through. Explain the Jorja Emerson Centre.
Yeah, I think what I'm doing now at Jorja Emerson Centre is very much based around our story, about my and Jorja's story and our family's story, about that process, that journey that was travelled, realising that there was nowhere to turn. walking around London at, late at night, in tears, realising what am I going to do for Jorja. Didn't want anybody else to have to face that again, and the fact of realising that the how poor the United Kingdom was at innovation and treatments. I realised that I wanted to set up a facility. I decided that I wanted to make health my career moving forward, which was a massive change in direction for me. But I think it comes back, John, as I changed as a person during this process. I very much was driven by all the entrapments of life and about money and thinking that's success. And now realising that's not success. And success comes in a variety of forms. And being able to do something that's around my daughter and her inspiration to me is where that came from. And I believe in an old proverb that you only die when the last person stops mentioning your name, and I want Jorja's name to be mentioned forever, hence why I called it the Jorja Emerson Centre. And we have pulled together some of the leading doctors within the UK, people, consultants who really do want change, who really do believe in a lot of medications like medical cannabis. And we have a fantastic state-of-the-art facility beside Paddington Station. We offer various diagnostic, right from MRI scans till live X-rays, till our on-site accredited lab where we can do full blood works, we can do full genetic testing, very much focused on that and focused on having patients getting access to medication. So cost has always been a massive barrier with medication, with medical cannabis medication. And we're looking now in the UK of 20,000 people are prescribed medical cannabis products within the UK. But the number should be 10 times that. But the problem is cost has been a real barrier. So I've teamed up with the largest company in now globally, Tilray, to create the Jorja Dream brand, and that's now an access scheme that will be running to help people who on low-income families get access to medication.
How is Jorja now? Is she well and functioning fine on the back of everything that's happened?
Yeah, it's night and day. John, she's doing absolutely fantastic.
Fantastic.
This child having over 30 seizures a day, couldn't lift her head off a pillow, to a 7-year-old living practically seizure-free, happy child, full of laughs, smiles, and her development off the back of that has been able to progress so much. And she's been going through intensive physiotherapy for walking, and being able to, her speech is coming along. So the difference is just night and day, which brings, which is why we're doing the clinical trial.
Yes, and this is all on the back of the medical cannabis.
It is, yeah, because we're seeing what had happened with Jorja, and in order to get something widespread use, a drug needs to be licensed, to which nobody has taken the mantle up to do that.
Sure.
So I've taken the mantle up to make sure we do that. So we're taking a product right the way through the clinical trial process. So eventually we have a licensed product at the end. Jorja's hope, and hopefully be prescribed to thousands of children across the UK and beyond.
It's crazy when the evidence is that compelling that you've got to go through this journey, and there are potentially people that need this now, but you've got to go through such a rigorous and expensive, I imagine it is,
yes, it's huge sums of money, but the idea is, I've always said in the UK, we need to have this two-pronged approach. So when people say we need more clinical research, I totally agree with them. With Medicaid drugs, we have a system in place to protect people ultimately.
Sure.
But we also have a system called unlicensed medicines to let people get access. So when you have children like Jorja, adults as well, who have come to an end, there's none of the licensed drugs are working. That's what them unlicensed drugs are there for. It's, we need to put the power back into the doctor's hands, where the doctor can make that decision. Because often in the UK, what is happening is actually the doctor isn't making the decision. It's usually a trust. It's usually a board who are going, you can't prescribe medical cannabis. We're not having that in our hospital. I've had doctors within the NHS, lots of doctors within the NHS who want to prescribe. Yeah. But they're told they can't by the trust. So that's part of, a big mission of mine, is getting this two-pronged approach where we realise that medical cannabis we do have enough evidence to know it's a relatively safe drug. We know that part. So what we should be able to do is prescribe that to people who need it now while the ongoing clinical studies are finished with for the licensed products.
Amazing. It's so mission-led, and obviously at the heart of the legacy of Jorja. You know, it's just incredible how much you're already doing. Yeah. I've so enjoyed talking to you, Robin. You're an absolute inspiration, what you're doing. So just
thanks.
Keep it going. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Extraordinary Life Stories is proudly sponsored by the Jorja Emerson Centre. Introducing the Jorja Emerson Centre, where innovation meets health. If you are tired of waiting for a diagnosis or believe there should be other ways to treat your condition, the Jorja Emerson Centre could help you. We take a patient-first approach and offer the latest medications and technological advancements in private healthcare across a number of key areas, including but not limited to headaches, migraines and chronic pain, mental health conditions, addiction and ADHD diagnosis and treatment. We have an on-site lab for diagnostics to enable you to receive health assessments on your terms and in your timelines. From our state-of-the-art clinic in central London, our consultants want to help you improve your quality of life and access to affordable healthcare services. Take back control of your health at the Jorja Emerson Centre.